Hello, welcome back to RetroBreak. Okay, so please don't unsubscribe when I say this, but the 3DS, for me personally, has always been my least favourite Nintendo handheld. I certainly played it a lot less than all of their other systems, but recently I've been trying to get back into it. The games are all quite affordable at the minute, and there's actually a big library of games that I missed out on back in the day. So in this video I'm going to take a look back at my time with the 3DS, some of the games that I played at the time, and some of the games that I've picked up more recently, and see whether my impressions of the system have changed over time or not. Also, please let me know in the comments down below what some of your favourite 3DS games are and what you think some games that I should pick up that I don't have in my collection. So I said in last week's episode that in this one I'm going to announce the winner of Umihara Kawase Fresh for the Switch, and the winner is, drumroll please, ta-da! I don't actually know who the winner is yet, but you can see the name up there. I haven't actually drawn the results yet, I'm recording this a week in advance. So congratulations to you, and this game will be in the post on its way over to you very soon. And as well, before we start this video, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to my friend and Patreon supporter, Kurt Bunker. He's actually doing a giveaway at the minute, so if you go onto his online store and buy something on there or support him on Patreon, you can be in with a chance of winning a modded system. So I'll put the information up here on the screen. Definitely go and check it out. He's a really great guy, and he's actually working on a Gameboy homebrew game, which I'm really looking forward to trying out in the near future. Now, on with the video. So as you know, I was a huge fan of the DS, so when E3 2010 came around, I sat there and watched it all live, and that is when Nintendo first showed off the 3DS system, and I was super excited.
Everyone, this is Nintendo 3DS.
The first game that I actually remember seeing running on the 3DS was Kid Icarus Uprising, and I was completely blown away. It was far beyond anything that I'd seen possible on the DS. But unfortunately, this game was still a long way off at the time. Before the 3DS came out, back in February 2011, I actually got the chance to play it early at MCM Comic Con in Telford, where I lived at the time. It was so cool to be able to play it early. The first game that I ever saw running on the 3DS was the game Steel Diver, which is actually a game that I don't even own, and it's only a few quid, so I may as well pick this up after I've finished filming this video. But the first time I laid eyes on the 3DS, like the caption said on the side of the booth where all the 3DSs were, seeing is believing. I just turned the 3D slider up and I could not believe what I was seeing. The fact that the water looked like it was going into the distance, like the bubbles were coming out of the screen, it was literally mind-blowing, and I really do love the 3D effect of the 3DS, because I honestly love the whole 3D gimmick, if you want to call it that. It's the same reason why I love playing VR games, just that extra depth and immersion that it gives you. And I think I'm one of the only people who actually plays the 3DS with the 3D slider all the way up every time I play a game that has 3D support. I think it's definitely one of the highlights of the system for me. I've kind of got a few stacks of games laid out here, and I'm just going to go through them from when I first got them, so let's start with that. So I pre-ordered the 3DS, of course, before it was released. At the time, I was still living back at home when I pre-ordered it, but when it came out, I was actually at university in student accommodation, so I actually remember I had to get a 3-hour bus ride all the way back home to my local game shop, and I picked up the 3DS, and I picked up these two games to go along with it. Super Monkey Ball 3D, which you might have heard me talk about in my Monkey Ball retrospective, and the other game I got was Pilot Wings, which I'm sure you guys all know is a fairly good launch title, but it is incredibly short. So the day I got the 3DS, I stayed at home that night and I played Pilot Wings, went back to uni the next day and finished it in 2 sittings, 100% complete as well. And to say I was a little disappointed by the length of it, considering it was a brand new system and I just wanted to keep playing it, is an understatement. I was so disappointed at how short it was. For what it was, I was extremely impressed with the system as a whole. The 3D effect in particular, I absolutely loved. In fact, I loved it so much, and I played the system so much, that when I wasn't even looking at the system, things that were supposed to be flat started kind of popping out in my eyes. I remember I was in a lecture and they had a PowerPoint presentation on the screen and I could just see the words coming off the screen even though it was completely flat. It was a really weird experience. So let me know down in the comments if any of you guys who had a 3DS at the time played it so much that you had that sort of optical illusion going on. It was such a strange thing. But the game itself, like I said, I finished it 100% in 2 days. And then, of course, I moved on to the next game that I got at launch, which is Super Monkey Ball 3D, and I finished this one all in one go. 100% complete, the entire game. I didn't die once. It took me about 5 hours, and honestly, buyer's remorse, I have never been so disappointed by a launch game as Super Monkey Ball 3D. I was actually genuinely upset, but I've still got it here. So yeah, to say that the launch of the 3DS was kind of underwhelming for me is a little bit of an understatement, and it would be a long time until the next game that was worthwhile came along. But before Zelda came out, I did pick up a few other games, literally just because there was nothing else to play on it, and I really wanted to get some playtime out of my new system. So the first game that I actually pre-ordered for the DS was Dead or Alive Dimensions, and this was actually a really good game. I loved the Dead or Alive series back on the Dreamcast. I used to play that one non-stop back in the day. So when this 3D version came out, I picked this up, really enjoyed it at the time, really enjoyed doing multiplayer with some of my friends at uni as well. And the other 3 games, I have to say I wasn't too fond of these. These were another 3 just to sort of pass the time until some bigger releases came out. So we've got Pac-Man and Galaga Dimensions, which was fun for a few hours, and we've got Shinobi, which I was incredibly disappointed by. I loved the Shinobi games back on the Mega Drive and the Sega Saturn back in the day, and I thought this one would be as good as them, but honestly it really wasn't. So I was quite disappointed by them too. And the other game that I picked up around this time was Ridge Racer 3D, which I did think was quite fun. I did enjoy this, and the 3D effect in this game is really cool. It goes way off into the distance. I really loved that. This one's actually a pretty good game. The main bulk of handheld games that I got after the launch of the 3DS were actually on the original DS. So I've actually got a bunch of games here that came out after, or I picked them up just after the 3DS. So we have things like Kingdom Hearts Recoded, Ghost Trick Phantom Detective. All of these games are fantastic. Pokemon White, I was actually really surprised that they didn't release this on the 3DS. And of course the sequel a year later even came out on the original DS. So imagine my kind of confusion mixed with disappointment, where I had this brand new system and all I was playing on it was games for an older system. And the fact of the matter was that the DS games actually looked worse on the 3DS than they actually did on the DS that I also had with me. So even though I'd got like a £350 brand new console, I was actually still playing my DSi more, which was kind of very disappointing for me at the time. There was also Pokemon Conquest that I remember pre-ordering. I actually imported this from America. Of course, Kirby's Mass Attack, one of my favourite Kirby platformers. The Last Window, the last episode in a really cool series by Sing. Sonic Colors for the DS, a great platformer. But they were all on the wrong system, and it really didn't help my first impressions of the 3DS, where all of the games that I wanted to play were on the system that came out before it. So eventually, after a long wait, and it was a painful wait, we finally got Ocarina of Time 3D, and it was a really good game, and it was definitely worth the wait, but it was something I'd already played many times before. So just like the 2 launch titles, I finished this no problem really quickly. And then there was another huge wait. And around that time as well, Nintendo actually lowered the price of the 3DS by something like over £100. But because I got mine early, I was part of something called the Ambassador program at the time, and that let you play some Game Boy Advance games and some Virtual Console games. I can't remember what they were, but that was just kind of a nice gesture from Nintendo to kind of say, sorry for the lack of games and sorry for the expensive price and the fact that they lowered it so soon. Now, the next set of games I've got here kind of came out either towards the end of the first year or just after. So we had Super Mario 3D Land, which although is kind of a cool concept, once again it was incredibly easy. I managed to blitz my way through the game almost in one sitting once again, so I was kind of disappointed by that. I think the Wii U game's a lot better, and I can't wait for it to come out on the Switch with the extra bits. There was also Star Fox 64 3D, which I kind of bought just to sort of pass the time with the system. Loved it on the N64, but I only played this one a few times. It did have a cool multiplayer mode though. Mario Kart 7, that was one that people were very excited for, so I know a lot of people were holding out for this, and I did really enjoy this one. I played this a lot back in the day. Sonic Generations was a huge disappointment compared to the Sonic Rush games on the DS. I thought this was a huge step back for the series for the Nintendo handhelds. The way that the DS Sonic games play are just so much better than this one. I really didn't like this at all. A game that I did like though is a spin-off for the Pokemon series called Super Pokemon Rumble. This one was actually really addictive. So you can kind of see up until this point I've kind of been mixed on my feelings about the 3DS, especially when it comes to comparing it to the DS in the same sort of time frame. So although the system was better in some regards, I also thought that it wasn't really as good as it could have been. Before we move on to year 2, I just wanted to bring up the fact that at the end of the first year of the 3DS's life, I actually did a video back when the 3DS was 1 year old looking back on the first year of the system, and I wasn't really that impressed at the time either.
And we're here, as the 3DS is nearly approaching its first year on sale, I thought now would be a good time to take a look back at the some of the better games released for the system so far. Anyway, this game was okay. Some of the levels are good, some of the levels are bad.
I actually remember spending more time on the music player than actually playing any of the games at one point. So there was a few more games to look forward to that year, including Kid Icarus Uprising, which is the game that I was super excited about and the main reason why I wanted a 3DS in the first place, and I absolutely loved it. I know a few people complain about the controls, but I didn't really have a problem with it. Never gave me cramp or anything. I thought it all felt quite natural. So let me know what you thought about Kid Icarus Uprising in the comments below. That'd be really interesting. Another few games I've got here. Tales of the Abyss. I was really looking forward to playing a full RPG on the system, but unfortunately I didn't really feel like I was getting on with this game very well. I really didn't like the main character, and I didn't think the 3D was that good either. Resident Evil Revelations, of course, with the Circle Pad Pro controller attachment. Really enjoyed this one, and I enjoyed it a few years later on the Wii U as well, so this is definitely one of the best games on the system for me, personally. And another game, I didn't quite enjoy this one as much as the DS entries in the series. This is Kingdom Hearts 3D Dream Drop Distance. It is a good game, and I almost completed it. I remember getting really stuck at the final boss on the second story of the game, and I gave up there. I should probably go back and finish it at some point, because I did enjoy it, but like I said, I didn't enjoy it quite as much as 358 over 2 days on the DS, which is still my all-time favourite Kingdom Hearts game. There were a few things that I really loved about the system. For one thing, Street Pass was a fantastic addition. I just loved going to all of the different Comic-Con events back at uni and meeting so many different people's Mii characters, swapping the jigsaw pieces with them and building up the 3D puzzle pictures. I loved the fact that it kept track of what games you were playing, and it told you exactly how long you'd played them for, as well as which games you'd played the most, and every time you got a new game, it would be added to this book of games. I thought it was a really cool way to keep track of everything. But anyway, year 2 came and it did start picking up a bit, so we had gems like Animal Crossing New Leaf, which I loved. I loved playing with all my friends at uni and visiting all their towns and stuff, and I still think this game's better than the Switch one as well. I had a lot of fun playing that. Another game that I had a lot of fun playing, I'm a huge fan of 2D Mario games, that was New Super Mario Bros. 2. I loved that version. In fact, it's probably my favourite out of all of the new Super Mario Bros. Games. I remember getting all the coins possible to unlock the gold Mario statue, so I really did enjoy that one. And of course, later that year, finally we got a proper Pokemon game for the 3DS, Pokemon X and Y. One of these was my girlfriend's copy, and we got both of these on day one, and I remember we both sat in bed all day and all night just playing these games all the way through. It was so fun. But these games were incredibly easy, and I didn't think they were as good as Black and White or Black and White 2 either. And then after that, it was kind of a turning point for the 3DS. Nintendo released the new 3DS, not confusing name at all, and I actually got the Ambassador's Edition for that system as well. I did an unboxing and a review of it when that came out in, I think, 2013 or 14, I can't quite remember, but take a quick peek at this video that I did back then.
Ooh, it looks shiny. There we go, you can already see it says Nintendo on it.
Unfortunately though, Nintendo completely missed the boat with original games for that system as well. I've got 2 of them here, and I think there's actually only about 5 that are actually exclusives for the new 3DS. So of course I got Xenoblade Chronicles 3D, which the year before on the Wii quickly turned into one of my favourite games of all time. I absolutely loved it. So when I got it on the 3DS, I was super excited to jump in and see just how good the 3D was and how well it translated to the DS. And unfortunately, I was incredibly disappointed. And that's something we're going to get back to again in the future. I hate to make this such a negative video, but I really didn't have a good time with the 3DS, if you can't tell. So I was really disappointed by this. The graphics were a lot worse than they were on the Wii. It kind of didn't make sense why they would try and squash such a big game down onto such a small system. I mean, at that point in time, I'm pretty sure that most people had a Wii anyway. And the other thing that really disappointed me about this game was the fact that the stereoscopic 3D was almost non-existent. And that seemed to be a running theme with a lot of later 3DS games. The 3D, unlike the earlier games where it would actually look like it had proper depth, a lot of the later games actually had 3D where it basically pushed everything back the same amount, so there wasn't really that sort of level of detail. And that's what they did with Xenoblade. Unless you're really up close to something, everything just looks like it's pushed back the same amount, and it was really disappointing. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into everything that I've got here, so I'm going to skip ahead a bit towards the end of the 3DS's life. Another 2 Pokemon games, I suppose you could say another 4 Pokemon games if you include the remakes, were Pokemon Sun and Moon and Pokemon Ultra Sun and Moon as well. And I have to say, unfortunately, I enjoyed these even less than I enjoyed X and Y. In fact, for me personally, they're probably right at the bottom of the Pokemon games. I've played all of them and I just thought the stories in this game I really didn't care about. The graphics were nice, but the environments all seemed really small, really compressed, and it just seemed a bit uninspired. But that's my personal opinion. I'm sure there's some guys out there, guys and girls out there, that really enjoyed those games. So I don't want to be too negative about them. Another really fond memory I have of the 3DS, well, the 2DS I guess, is going to the launch party for Pokemon Sun and Moon. I did a whole video of it on my channel when the game came out, so I'll put a link in the description if you want to check it out and see the backstory as to how I got this right here. It was a fantastic day out and I really enjoyed it. So there was 2 really cool Kirby platformers that came out for the system. There was Kirby Triple Deluxe, and a few years later there was Kirby Planet Robobot, and I actually enjoyed these 2 quite a lot. Triple Deluxe was kind of on the generic side though, and it wasn't that much different to Kirby's Adventure for the Wii. Apart from the 3D, which was actually quite a cool inclusion in this game, it kind of reminded me of Wario Land on the Virtual Boy, which is a game that Nintendo really should have re-released for the 3DS. I was really hoping for the entire lifetime of the 3DS that they would put Virtual Console and Virtual Boy games on the system, but it never happened. And then a few years later we got Planet Robobot also for the 3DS. This one I enjoyed a lot. This is actually one of my all-time favourite Kirby games, and I really love the Kirby series, so that's saying a lot. Definitely recommend playing that. And then, right at the end of the 3DS's life, I'm skipping a bit ahead here, there was another Kirby game, and because the previous 2 Kirby games were so good, I actually pre-ordered this one and I was so excited to go and get it. So imagine my huge disappointment when I got home that night and I put this game on, and it was just a collection of mini-games and they weren't any fun at all. This is by far my least favourite game in the entire Kirby series, and a huge disappointment for me. And that kind of rings true for pretty much every other game that I've got here from towards the end of the 3DS's life, or kind of in the middle of the 3DS's life for this one's sake. So, new Yoshi's Island. Just like Kirby, Yoshi's Island for the SNES was one of my all-time favourite games. So when I heard there was a proper sequel coming out, I was so excited, and I was hugely disappointed. It was super easy and super basic, and I finished it all in one sitting, and I don't think I even died once. There was also Animal Crossing Happy Home Designer. What another huge disappointment. They completely stripped out everything that made Animal Crossing good, and they replaced it with the most basic kind of home designing and making the different animals happy. There was literally nothing to this game, and I don't know, it felt like a waste of money, honestly. I think they just made it to try and sell the amiibo cards, which didn't really take off. There was Man, here we go. Metroid Prime Federation Force. If you were there for Nintendo's E3 2016, I think it was, you know the backlash that this game got. Everyone was expecting a proper Metroid Prime game for the 3DS. So when we got this, which doesn't even really include Samus, and it was just a bunch of multiplayer missions that no one really cared about, and the way they introduced it by just saying it was Blast Ball, I mean, no one wanted this at all. And I know it's got its fans, but most of the people that I know who played it say it's rubbish. And I've played it for a little bit, and unfortunately I have to agree. Oh man, the 3DS is filling me with disappointment. Triforce Heroes and Chibi Robo Ziplash, two of the worst games in their respective franchises. Chibi Robo Ziplash, like a lot of the later platformers for the system, was just uninspired, considering how really cool the GameCube game was and the DS game that came before it. This was another one that I pre-ordered and picked up on day one, and once again I finished it no problem in a few hours, and I just didn't have any fun while I was playing it. It was a really basic game. And then we have Triforce Heroes, which was a really bad take on the Four Swords Adventures style of game, but with only 3 links instead of 4. If you were playing it online, which of course I had to do to play with my friends, if you wanted to get 3 people, you also had to get a randomer come and join your game, but there was no way of actually interacting with them, so most of the puzzles in the game I just couldn't do, because the people online were just being stupid and just throwing me in pits and stuff, so I had a really bad experience with this game. Then there was Hey Pikmin, which is kind of okay, I guess. It was one of the much later releases, and I kind of enjoyed it, but once again, it's very simple, and it's nowhere near as good as the rest of the games in its respective franchise. And then there was games like WarioWare Gold, which are okay, but they're not really new games, they're just compilations of better games. The same is true for the Rhythm Heaven or Rhythm Paradise game for the 3DS, which I also picked up recently, but of course I already had the games on the GBA, the Wii, the DS, and these are basically just compilations of games that people already had elsewhere. I mean, they're good for people who didn't already have the games on different systems, but for me, a big Nintendo fan, I'd already played all this before, so it wasn't really that exciting for me. Recently though, I've really got back into the 3DS in a big way, and I've been trying to get some of the more obscure and more interesting looking games that I missed out on while the system was new. So I'm actually really looking forward to trying to get into the 3DS and to give it the love that it deserves, because I know there's a lot that I missed out on at the time. Maybe it's because I just wasn't that interested in the system, maybe it's because I'd moved away to uni and I was too busy studying and working and hanging out with friends and stuff, so it wasn't really like the DS where I was at college, I had a few days off each week and I was just playing it non-stop. So maybe that has something to do with why I don't like it as much as some of the other systems. But I do have a really nice stack of games here that I'm super excited to get back into. So I just picked up Shantae and the Pirate's Curse for the 3DS. That is a great game. I've played a little bit of it in the past, but I never actually owned a physical version, so I'm really happy to have that. I also have Virtue's Last Reward, which I'm really looking forward to playing. Picross 3D Round 2. Theat Rhythm Final Fantasy. Heard that one's really good. Dylan's Dead Heat Breakers, looking forward to playing that. Ever Oasis by the same team that made the 3DS versions of the Zelda games, so really looking forward to getting stuck into that one. And Etrian Odyssey Untold. So that's just a few that I've picked up recently, and please let me know if there's any more that I missed out on. And if you want to hear my thoughts about these games in a bit more detail, I actually talked about them a few weeks ago in a pickups video, so I won't bore you all again with that right now. I'll put a link to that video in the description below. As you can probably tell, it really hurt me to actually make this video because I hate being negative, so please, please, please let me know down in the comments below some 3DS games that you think I missed out on. One of the main problems with the 3DS compared to the DS was that I would go into the shops back when the DS was out and I'd see all sorts of really cool looking obscure-ish games, and I just didn't have that at all with the 3DS. It felt like it was either first-party Nintendo games, which I was really excited to get, and about half of them were pretty good, and then it kind of felt like a load of Nintendo games that had just been ported from the Wii onto the DS, which I wasn't really interested in. And then it was just like the most popular third-party games made it onto the system, but no companies really wanted to take a risk like they did back on the DS. If you want to see some DS games that I thought were really cool and really unique, I did do a Hidden Gems episode for the DS, which I highly recommend going and watching. I was planning on doing one for the 3DS, but unfortunately I don't really have 15 games worth calling hidden gems, to be completely honest with you. So please let me know in the comments what games you would recommend me getting for the system. I'll do like a pan of all the games I've got here so you know which ones I've got. And that brings us to the end of this episode. I really hope it wasn't too negative. I hope you enjoyed having a listen and a look back at my history with the system. Let me know yours down in the comments. Maybe you got on with it a lot better than I did. Please consider checking out Patreon if you want to support these videos and see some behind the scenes looks. And please subscribe if you haven't already. I would really appreciate that. I'm on my way to 10,000 subscribers and I'm so excited for that milestone. That's it for now though. Thank you all so much for watching and I will see you all next week for the next episode. Goodbye!